Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to The Big Question from King Edward VI Handsworth School in Birmingham. I'm Nicky Campbell. Well, it took more than a century of argument and struggle, but now British women have the right to be educated, the right to marry the man of their choosing, the right to own their own property, the right to borrow and to manage their own money, the right to vote, the right to work at whatever trade or profession they so choose. Women can be queens, prime ministers, they can win Nobel Prizes for science, Olympic medals for boxing. They can still not be a bishop, though, or a Catholic priest, or lead men in prayer in a mosque or an Orthodox synagogue. So this morning we're asking just one very big question. Are religions unfair to women? To debate this, we have distinguished theologians and writers, campaigners and converts, believers and apostates from 4 faiths. And they will be encouraged by our very lively Birmingham audience. You can join me too via Twitter. You can log on to bbc.co.uk/thebigquestions. You'll find links to continue the discussion online. Well, last month the Dalai Lama said he would be pleased if his successor were to be female. Now we are 21st century, he said. Female have more potential, so should take more active role regarding promotion of human compassion. Well, it might happen soon in Tibet, but we're a long way from a woman being elected to Pope or enthroned as the Archbishop of Canterbury or appointed Chief Rabbi in Britain. Are religions unfair to women? Professor Francesca Stavrakopoulou, Theology and Religion, Exeter University. The very person. Now, looking at the scriptures, how do they portray women in general? Has there been a bit of cutting and pasting by men?
Cutting and pasting, not really. I think the way in which women tend to be portrayed in the scriptures, both Hebrew Bible, Old Testament and New, is that women are always defined in terms of their relationship to men, whether they're a wife, a mother, or a sister, or a daughter. That's always the way in which women are defined. And they're basically seen as, well, women aren't the main targets of the scriptures anyway. The scriptures weren't written for women. They were written by men, for men, about their very male God.
So ignored, basically?
They are baby machines. They're celebrated in terms of their bringing in new life, perpetuation of the generations. There's probably only one biblical book that really celebrates what it is to be a woman and a sexual being as a woman, and that's the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon. But even in that text, it's very much written from the point of view of a male writer and the voyeur's gaze looking at this sexy woman.
It's quite erotic, that, isn't it?
Very erotic.
Yeah. But has some of it, when I say cutting and pasting, has some of it being interpreted within patriarchal societies to be even more, male-orientated?
Some people argue that we've got conflicting views of what women are supposed to be doing in Christianity. So, for example, some people argue that, according to the Gospels, Jesus was quite pro-women. He had women followers. Some of the earliest church leaders were quite wealthy women. On the other hand, in some of the Pauline writings, some of the letters that St. Paul was supposed to have written, he's not that keen on women. Women shouldn't be talking in church. Women should cover their heads. Women are secondary to their husbands.
Yes, I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man. She must be silent. Well, you've broken that already, haven't you?
I don't think he'd like me much anyway.
Wives, submit to your husband. And all that stuff in Christina Rees, all that stuff in Leviticus about women being unclean. Do you just skip those bits?
No, not at all. And that's the tough thing. We can't skip bits, but we have to understand when they were written and who they were written for. And as Francesca said, it was mainly written by men for men. And so what we have to do is use the understanding we have now, because since everything in the Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, was written, we've had the Enlightenment. We now understand reproduction in a different way. So the taboo laws in Leviticus, talking about how women had to be separate and they were literally seen as unclean when they were menstruating and after giving birth, even though the vestiges of that carry on.
Do you not find that stuff, and this is your religion, do you not find that stuff incredibly offensive?
No, those are the texts. That's the understanding the people had then, and we don't know it all now. But Nicky, what we do know now, we know enough to make the changes that we can, because Paul, he wrote as a good Jewish man of in first century Palestine, if Paul were alive and here today, he was absolutely passionate about helping people to understand who Jesus was, who he saw as the Christ, the Messiah.
So he'd be different now.
If Paul were here in Britain today, he would be scolding the Church of England, my beloved church, that still discriminates against women. And he was saying, our mission, we are in a culture, we don't see women the way we used to see women anymore, as property of their fathers or their husbands. Go out, allow women to be bishops and in.
Do you think Paul would be saying all that stuff now?
I have to confess, I don't think he probably would. I think he was pretty much... There was no sense of two genders in the ancient world. Women were often seen, particularly in these ancient Jewish and ancient Christian societies, as a deviant form of a man. And I think Paul would find that very hard to let go of.
But Paul, there were two sides of Paul. Paul, locked into his understanding, and he was doing the best he could with his understanding. And the transcendent Paul, who could write how we're all members of the same body, and anyone who is baptized into Christ places their faith, are absolutely all the old barriers are broken.
They're not going to have it all their own way. Don't worry. Liz, I want you to tell us about Eve.
About Eve. So Eve, whether you take it as literal or sort of figurative, Eve was the first woman, and basically she was created to be Adam's helper. And it's very important that she was created, and it says very clearly in Genesis, that both male and female were created in the image of God.
That's Genesis 2 or Genesis 1? Which
This is 2, I think.
Genesis 1.
Is it 1? 1. Okay, these people know better than I do.
1, they're created together. Genesis 2, they're created as a helper.
They are
two creation stories. One's equal and one's as a helper.
But a helper is equal, and this is where the interesting debate comes in. But anyway, because Eve, whether that's literal or figurative, was taken from Adam's rib, which is from the side, not from the head, not from the feet, so not to rule and not to be oppressed, but from the side to be an equal partner in life. And so Eve was Adam's partner, but God also did say that Adam was first and Eve was to be his helper, and then in the fall, which is when sin entered the world, that was turned on its head. So it was meant to be God ruling people and people ruling creation, and in the fall you have the serpent tempting and leading Eve, the woman, astray, and then her leading her husband, Adam. It wasn't fault. Adam should have said no.
Yeah.
He could have said no.
Yeah.
He chose to follow Eve, and in so doing, he said, I know better than God. Unfortunately, similar to what you're saying, I
Is
know
that why
better
women
than
can't
God.
be leaders?
Yeah, it goes back to... So that passage you read out from 1 Timothy, if you look what carries on, it actually refers back to Adam and Eve.
And if they do become leaders in the church or elsewhere, you think there are potential problems?
There are potential problems, yeah. I mean, particularly on the issue of bishops that you mentioned earlier. So the Church of England is doing its absolute best to be inclusive, to avoid division. And that's a fantastic thing, because we are called to unity. And this is a secondary issue. I'm not saying that people who disagree are not Christians, but as a layperson, I can make this decision. I can choose to go to a church with a male vicar or a female vicar, and I have that freedom of choice. If you are a male vicar who has doctrinal reasons why you're not happy to have a woman in leadership over you because you believe and hold firm to those teachings, that is where the problem's coming in.
I understand.
And it needs to be a compromise.
So you believe as God is head of Christ, so man is head of woman. And what about something like a woman prime minister? Might there be problems there as well?
So there's no prohibition, because the Bible's only referring to marriage and church.
But there could be a problem.
But there could be a problem, because you've got to ask about the dynamic of that relationship, with her husband. When she goes home, if she's been ruling the country, does her husband, is he still head of that marriage?
But this is where it falls to bits.
Can I bring in
the whole human beings?
Look, we've got 6 angry people over here. We've got plenty of time.
First female prime ministers were Muslim ones in Bangladesh.
Yeah, okay, we've got plenty of time.
The first female prime minister was
quick point of information.
Sri Lanka.
Women have 2 X chromosomes, and the Y chromosome is a mutation. If only they'd known that at the time, they might have written a different story.
In terms of physical side, everyone's sort of in the womb, they're all female and they become male.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Well, we were talking about prime ministers, so the obvious thing to say is we've just lost Lady Thatcher. I'd love to have seen you argue with her that she wasn't supposed to be in a position of
I
leadership.
didn't actually say that. I very clearly said that wasn't the case.
No, but she said when Lady Thatcher got home, there might have been problems in the marriage.
And I said there's no prohibition, there's absolutely no problem. I don't personally have any problem with women holding positions of responsibility, any level. I'm just saying it might potentially cause tensions. If it doesn't for her, then that's brilliant.
But when she went to speak to the Church of Scotland, as somebody who'd been raised a Methodist, essentially you would have said, sorry, Prime Minister, you cannot address the Church of Scotland because you're a woman.
I don't know about what happened at that meeting. What we're talking about is teaching the Word of God. Anything else?
No, your interpretation of the word.
Yeah,
It's about church, and it's about church, and it's about marriage, and that's very clearly what the Bible's talking about.
I have a question.
Vicky.
Yeah, I wonder, because I would say that your interpretation of male and female roles actually really undersells what the resurrection of Jesus Christ accomplished. My view of it is so much bigger than the view that you're selling. I am a real fan of the verse, and I want to ask you what your interpretation of this. Galatians 3:28 says, there is neither male nor female, Greek nor Jew, slave nor free. The resurrection of Jesus has done away with these old divisions. So for me, I would look at all of the divisions that you're putting up, and I would say, actually, if the resurrection isn't enough to cancel out those barriers, then what has it accomplished?
It's a great verse you bring up. Brilliant verse. But it's not, you're twisting its meaning. So actually, that's what verse is talking about.
Straightforward. There's no slave or free.
It's talking about salvation.
Can I just say, Liz, that's not the first time I've heard that phrase on this programme. You're twisting its meaning.
So what that passage is talking about is our salvation. In Jesus' death and resurrection, every single person is equally saved. There is no difference in the amount that we're saved. But that doesn't mean that we're no longer different.
So it's not enough?
No, it's completely enough.
How come we couldn't fix that delineation between Adam and Eve? Because that was the fall, wasn't it? So prior to that...
So before
is there headship
fall,
in heaven? Do males in heaven then remain...
You know, I don't know.
Because on your
very interesting question I don't know the answer to.
Nikki, headship is a concept that doesn't even appear in the Bible. There is no word headship in the Bible at all. You can look, it's not there. It's an accretion that is put on by Paul using the word head.
Biblical expert beside you.
Head, phale.
Francesca.
And it has ambiguous meanings. We don't know what it meant. Paul was trying to have order, and his understanding, and he even said himself that there are some things that he appeals to nature about, like men having short hair and women having long hair and things like that. And he always finished those passages by saying, nevertheless, I say to you, in Christ, you are both under Christ.
Very quickly, Francesca Stavrakopoulou, headship in the Bible.
Not in that term, no, but what it's doing is drawing on the idea that in the Old Testament, idolatrous, rebellious Israelites were the adulterous wife of God. In the New Testament writers, particularly Paul, are drawing on that Old Testament image, if you like, and transferring to say that the church is the wife of God. But because it's the wife of God, it has to be obedient. It's all about obedience.
Well, like St. Tertullian and St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas all said after Eve that women were in some way defective. So those writers. 1 second. I want to bring the rabbi in.
I'm feeling
You've been
out of this.
Good morning. Good morning.
First of
Can
all,
I ask you something? But we're going to further.
Jewish.
You're shaking my hand, but you wouldn't shake our female researcher's hand this morning. Why not?
That's correct.
Why not?
That's correct.
Why not?
Because Judaism sees we don't have a problem with separate roles. There's such a thing called collaborative. And I'm afraid the debate so far...
But she put her hand out to shake your hand and you wouldn't shake her hand.
And I said that that's not something I do.
Why not?
Because I don't touch those things that don't belong to me.
Well, that doesn't belong to you.
This is something that... This is something which I've been taught from a very young age.
Do I belong to you?
I respect a woman, and as such, I won't touch her
But you don't
flesh
respect
to flesh.
If you just touched Nikki, so you're saying you don't respect
I don't have an issue of you might, going on the previous debate. You might have a problem with that, but we don't. I don't have a problem shaking a man's hand.
But you have
shaking
a problem shaking a woman's
hand, it could be misconstrued, and by many
misconstrued.
Who's doing the interviewing here?
Well, it's a discussion program.
It would be taken. It could be taken as an affront. So that's my.
Well, she might take it as an affront that you didn't want to shake her hand.
Well, I said that's my sensitivity,
right,
and
okay.
That's the way.
Is it because she might be menstruating?
Nothing to do with
Nothing
that.
to do with that.
I think as well, a lot of the time when
I'll be back with you in a minute.
for example, in other faiths, like in Islam,
the shaking of the hand is, it's more to do with like steps, right? So if you shook a woman's hand or a male's hand or vice versa, that's one step. So in Islam, it's about prevention. So it's not shaking the hand, it's like they have different rules. So for example, you shouldn't necessarily, if you don't have a lawful particular reason to be alone in a room with a man, or you shouldn't embrace men. So these are all different steps to prevent things from happening.
Come to that. We'll come to Islam shortly. I want to ask you, sir, about the prayer, Rabbi. Tell us about this prayer that Orthodox Jewish men say every morning. Blessed be God, King of the universe, that thou hast not made me a woman.
Okay. Judaism presents a view of creation, Adam and Eve. I'm just going back to that for a minute as a preamble to help answer your question.
Right.
When Adam was created, so was Eve, and according to many traditions, they were actually joined back to back. They were then separated. So the clear Jewish traditional view of the roles of men and women are as absolute equals and as collaborative equals. Because when a man and a woman come together, then they become a whole. And that's the whole pattern that's created in Jewish law and Jewish thought. So a man says, I'm happy, I've been created the way I am as a man. Even though as a man, it has its downsides, inverted commas. A woman says, I'm happy I'm being created as a woman. And, you know, to try and give a Hebrew Bible, to use Christian nomenclature, the Old Testament view of women as being the underdogs, there were women prophetesses, there were the matriarchs. I mean, the woman's role is as much as
why
men.
This is important. Why then, if a woman has a boy child, she's unclean for 33 days. When she has a girl child, she's unclean for 66 days. Why is that?
This is because you're dealing there. When you talk about unclean, doesn't mean dirty. You're talking about because that's what people you use.
What it means.
You use the Hebrew word. You use the Hebrew word tameh, which means it's translated in English as unclean, but it has a context to it. Yeah. The context is within temple time society. If, for example, you trod on a creepy crawly, you would become unclean. That's tameh. So it's within that context. There are those things that render one tameh and those things that don't.
Why are you rendered less tameh if you have a boy and more tameh if you have a girl?
I don't know the answer to that.
There is no other explanation
do you know the answer,
whatsoever than unclean means
for
unclean, impure, and I'm sure Francesca will know.
Francesca?
I'm sorry, you said that very categorically.
The reason
I spend about maybe 10 hours a day studying the sources. I'm very interested in your categorical statement, which clearly runs contrary to everything I understand. Could you please explain?
Well, Francesca, you studied this area.
I don't spend that same amount of time, but in my reading of the Torah and understanding, how else is when men and women commit sins, it takes exactly twice as long for the woman to become pure and clean again than it does for the man. And Nikki talked about 33 days after a boy child,
what sin?
And then 60. In Leviticus, don't look confused. It's in there.
What
it's
sins? Please tell me.
A wide variety of sins. Wide variety of sins. And then.
What about the double standards on blood that you've spoken about,
standards.
Francesca? The double standard on blood. What do you mean by that?
There's a double standard on blood regulations in Torah, and it's based on male and female. So when a woman gives birth to a male child, that male child is circumcised on the 8th day. The blood of the circumcised penis, so male circumcision blood, in a way hastens her impurity process. So she's only impure for a shorter amount of time, 33 days. Whereas if she has a female child, there's no penis to circumcise, so therefore she stays impure for longer. What it comes down to is that the blood of animal sacrifice and the blood of the male circumcised penis is pretty much, it's holy. Female blood, whether it's menstruation, whether it's the blood of childbirth, is unholy.
Can I say it again? I mean, that is a very particular construction placed on verses which are taken out of context.
It's not out of context.
And let me give you a very clear and easy understanding of that.
A difficult understanding would be fine. I'm sure I can cope with that.
Nowadays, the restrictions which applied to temple sacrifice don't apply anymore, but circumcision does. So to try and draw a comparison between the blood of circumcision, which we don't make a great big deal out of,
You make a deal of Passover, you make a deal of the female role in Passover, it's the same thing. Again, it's picking and choosing, I'm afraid.
No, it's not. Nowadays, there is no blood involved in sacrifice. It's not there anymore. So the comparison between
circumcision
and between the laws
and women being socially displaced while they're menstruating is still an important part of Judaism.
What's that called again? There's a name for that, isn't there? It's niddah. Why are women? Do they have to be removed when they're menstruating?
No.
I wish I could be removed while I was menstruating. In fact, I have to tell you something, if you don't mind me saying, something about Samaritan women whom I met. They came over to do a singing concert, Samaritan men and women, in London, and it was quite amazing. They have this 3,000-year-old singing tradition, and when they start to sing, your mind's blown away. It's incredible. So I was very interested to hear about their traditions, and they have very, very, very low divorce rates, because I was interested in what does this impurity mean, this ritual impurity. I had my mind open to the fact that it might mean something helpful, hopefully, and then what they said was, the women were saying it's so fantastic. When we're menstruating, we've got a special little flat. We stay there, we read, we pray. The husbands do all the work, look after the children, do everything. I'm like, I like this view of unclean. I'm going to ring a bell this time next month.
So
I'm just going to stay out of the way of everyone else and have a better life.
Kate, as an avowed atheist, what do you make of all this?
Well, I'm appalled, Nikki. I'm genuinely appalled and horrified. I've got...
Which bit?
I've got the whole... Everything, Nikki, everything. We've got this whole pile of people arguing, bickering, frankly, about what various verses in various books mean. I can't help thinking these deities you're so enthusiastic about should have written a bit more clearly. And in the meanwhile, if we look at the real world, there are thousands of women, millions of women all around the world who, as a result of religion, are being denied the right to vote, being denied the right to drive, being denied the right to leave the house and get the job that they want. Young girls having their clitorises removed unsafely, unsanitary conditions, women being killed, women having their lives ruined, and we're sat here bickering about what verses mean. The reality is, religion, just look at the real world, religion is incredibly damaging to women.
I have to say, as a man, I'll go so far with you, Kate, but not the whole way. Religion is not doing that to women, men are. Yes, they are. But let's see that in the context. Well, whether you think it's fictional or not, and I don't, let's look at it in the broadest context. It's men using religion to oppress women. This has been happening throughout human history, but we have to put it in that context and not say that only religion is doing this.
But this is why it's so appalling. It makes me feel, I do feel quite upset when I was listening to you talk, because we already have enough men trying to keep women down in this world, and yet you're supporting this. How can you do that?
Because the Bible is very clear.
We had some hands up. Before we move on to talk to our Muslim guest, looking forward to talk to you again, a couple of hands went up. Yes, you wanted to say something. Quick points, please.
Yes, I think the lady needs to understand that it's not the fault of the religion. As the gentleman said, it's the fault of those interpreting the religion. So a clear distinction needs to be made, and I think you really need to understand that.
So it's the culture, not the religion. Yes, gentleman back there. Good morning.
You got to look at Islam now. Who was the first person who accepted Islam was a woman.
That's what I was going to say.
Khadija, peace be upon her, she was the first woman. One of the biggest scholars of Islam was, again, a woman.
We're coming to that right now. You've given us a superb cue to talk about that.
The first person who adapted religion in Islam was a woman.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that right now.
Catholicism, the greatest woman in creation is Mary, and also we did a lot of
the greatest woman in creation is what?
Is Mary.
I was going to hang on. Wait. I was going to talk about Islam now, but we just had this. The greatest woman in creation was Mary, and you've given us a little diversion. What do you mean?
Well. If you think of human beings, what are we aiming for? What is a human person? What is the greatest thing a human person can be?
Mary.
Is it a virgin and a mother?
The greatest thing a human person can be, that's a big question to ask, but it's, the Catholic Church would say, in profound communion with God, and therefore in profound communion with each other, and in profound communion with creation, and releasing and living all their talents for love. Now, the Virgin Mary is the greatest woman in creation because she listened to God,
she was
received
pure.
her.
She was pious.
she was obedient totally to receiving the gift that she was given. And when we respond to the giftedness that God gives us, we grow as people. So it is about human flourishing.
It's
and
about
when we were
obedience.
mentioning, can I just say one thing?
It's about obedience.
There's
It's about a woman being obedient to a male God and being obedient to her male child.
Can I just say something really clear? Because you did quite
Okay, Sarah, you finished. Sarah finished.
You did some nice cutting and pasting before, and I wanted to add to your quote about, you said women must submit to their husbands, but straight after it said, husbands must submit to their wives in Christ. So there's a bigger picture. And no, that's not at all what it means. Why do I know that? Because when a husband submits to his wife, he has to behave, as it says in the Bible, as Christ behaved towards the church, laying down his life. There's a beautiful word to describe what Christ did, and it's the inspiration for all men. And it is kenosis, which means complete self-emptying. I'd like to see some more of that. I live with 3 priests, actually, so I have a very interesting experience, a personal experience.
Sounds like a
it's
sitcom.
like. It does almost, and maybe I'll get a contract for it, but I'd quite enjoy it. But the fact is, I live with men who consciously do try to purify their hearts, their minds, their thoughts, and I feel extremely celebrated as a woman when I'm living with men who are undergoing a spiritual path, and I do not feel oppressed or pushed down. I feel celebrated and lifted
But Mary
up.
is the ultimate in human creation.
She is the ultimate in human creation because she's totally open to God.
Okay.
Well, that's...
Actually, Vicky, we've not heard from Vicky.
Well, I think I would say, just to step back one point, when you talk about kenosis, I mean, I totally agree, it's a great point, but it feels like when we interpret the Bible, we have to actually go so deep in explaining it. And on a superficial surface reading of the Bible, I can understand why people think it's patriarchal. And yet I love the Bible. My theology is probably very similar.
To be like Mary?
I do, but I think when I get to heaven, I will be saying to God, why did you not explain things more clearly? And I think it's important that we can be honest about the Bible. I respect it, I honour it, but I think it's a very difficult book. And I think some folks to actually go, no, it's black and white, it's very clear, you know, it's not anti-women. It looks anti-women, let's be honest. But if you look at it deeper, if you put it in context...
I think you're making a really important point there, because before Christianity came along, it was in a particular society. The Greeks were still struggling to work out whether women were human.
But Mary is the were they?
And Christianity said, you're equal, you're dignified.
Which is great, but if you don't want to be...
It's really great, Nikki.
It's really great.
It's really great, Nikki.
I'll shake your hand.
It's great.
But listen, if a woman does not want to submit in that way and be pure and be virginal, is she a failure if she doesn't want to be like Mary?
Oh, absolutely not. You made a beautiful point about the Song of Songs being beautifully erotic. All I will say, there's one beautiful thing I've got to say, is that
you said so many beautiful things so far.
Thank you, Nikki. I love you. The beautiful thing about the Song of Songs is that reality is revealed as marital, spousal, whether you're single, married, you are living a spousal reality. It's a very deep thing, your sexuality. What is your sexuality? What is your femininity? What is your masculinity? It's spousal and it's deep, and it's worth thinking about, isn't it?
Well, I would have
Christina, very quickly, before we'll be with you in just one second.
In the Christian tradition, I mean, that sounds very good, but in the Christian tradition, as Cole has said, it's men in power using the religious institution to determine what's normal and what goes. And throughout our Christian tradition, very sadly, the cutting-edge theologians of their day saw women's sexuality not as something beautiful and to be celebrated. They were terrified
Thomas
of it.
Aquinas and others,
they were terrified, and they were terrified. I mean, Tertullian
Just the legacy of Eve?
called women a devil's gateway, and women were sewers built over. Temples built over sewers, and there was an aristocratic French abbot who told his novice monks, when you embrace a woman, you're embracing a sack of manure. And in the same breath, they taught other things about the Christian faith, which have stood the test of time. No, but what I'm saying is that for too long in our Christian tradition, run by men, they said that to be a good Christian man, you had to divorce yourself from your sexuality, and what's the one thing they couldn't control? Sexual desire and women. So they tried to separate it out, and women were scary.
Let me just say one
very
thing.
quick. Kate was bursting to come in there.
This is
especially on
an
that last
amazing point. We've talked about Mary the Virgin, we've talked about, and the truth is that major religions around the world, one of their main focuses continually seems to be to control women's bodies, access to contraception, access to abortion, all this kind of stuff. And the reality is that when you take away from women the right to control their own fertility by putting this virgin ideology on them and all these kind of religious laws, you take away their opportunity to escape poverty, to get an education, to have control over their own lives. That single cause, led by major religions, is the one main thing that is preventing women from leading better lives and developing and escaping poverty and all those things.
Now, Alison, good morning.
Good morning.
As an ex-Muslim, there were things in the Quran that you were very uncomfortable with when it came to women. What particular things are you talking about?
For example, chapter 4, verse 34, it talks about obedient men, obedient women who obey their husbands, and they're perfectly fine. But it talks about rebellious women, and it says it addresses their husband, their men, and tells them if they rebel you shouldn't sleep next to them on the same bed, and you are allowed to punish them. This word punish can be interpreted as whipping, lash, or Muslim apologists, they call it, just a simple punishment.
You have to be in disguise, of course, because...
yeah.
Why?
Because I come from a Muslim background, and my parents still live... I come from Iran, and my parents still live in Iran, and but the punishment for apostasy is capital punishment, as you may know. So I have to be in disguise because of my parents' security and my family.
What about surah in the Quran, certain things? There's one, isn't there? And we'll get corrected on this, no doubt, by our Muslims over here, but...
women are fields too. Go into your fields.
Women are fields. Go into your fields whichever way you like.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
It's women are objects to you. Women are your property. Your wives are your property. You can be however you like to them.
No, it's just talking about sexual positions. Actually, sorry to bring the tone down a little bit. It actually, at the time, there was issues about men, and they used to believe that certain sexual positions were not allowed, and the Quran is just saying, actually, within sex, you are free to experiment or do, you are together. I think taking this apart from other verses in the Quran which talk about marriage, which say that actually addresses both men and women, not men separately, which say you are from the same soul, you've been created so you can reside together in tranquility. It has to be taken within the context.
Specifically, wait, there's another couple of things I just want to put on the
sexuality.
Another couple of things I just want to put on the agenda, then open it up. Because a lot of people, one second. A lot of people say that, a lot of Muslims argue that Islam is fairer to women than other religions. But then we have, and I have a devout Muslim friend who's campaigning on this vigorously at the moment. He thinks that men get a double share of inheritance. He says this needs to change. He says this is an absolute outrage. It was in context of the time. And there's the other thing as well, that you need 2 women witnesses to be equal to 1 man in case one of the women forgets. It's quite a patronising surah, if I may be so bold.
Okay, these might be certain rules, but can I go back to the list? Can I go to your list, Nikki, at the beginning of the programme, where you talked about women getting a right to education, to wealth, to work? This was all established more than 1400 years ago by Islam at the time where it was revolutionary. So Islam actually, all the things that the debate we were having earlier on about clean and unclean, or whether the Quran was written to men, it was not. It was written to men and women and Muslims and non-Muslims. There are issues about inheritance. This was written in the context of a time where men were financially responsible for women. So at the time when the woman was more likely to be having children, not now where women are working, or a different context.
But there are traditionalists now who say we should still cleave to it, and there are modernists who say this needs to change.
Exactly. So as a modernist, I would argue that in different contexts we have to interpret this.
And the witness thing as well. The witness thing as well. Yeah?
Well, absolutely, the witness thing completely with that. It was a time again where women might be putting their lives in danger if they were actually standing up to be witnesses. So that you have to understand that the holy books have parts of them which were written in the context of the times, and other parts of them which were written for universally for all times. And this is the discrimination we need to make in this. But to actually
so even though it's the word of God, it was the word of God in the context of the time
God
and a particular
says,
place.
I am using similes. You have to see beyond the words I am using. To actually,
Beautifully explained, if I may say so. Because
Thank you,
you really explain, because these are such contentious surah.
Absolutely.
The gentleman there wanted to say something. Yeah,
I just
go on.
wanted to say about the law of inheritance law. In Islam, if a wife passes away and she leaves a daughter and a husband, the daughter takes half and the husband takes a quarter. Now you tell me which one's more.
But does that trouble you?
The daughter takes more than the son.
Sorry?
The son takes more than the daughter.
So in this circumstance,
and also for his sister.
The daughter has taken more than the father. The daughter has taken more than the father in this circumstance.
You claim that this book is written for all the time and it can be used. And also, there are people, the Islamic government of Iran, Saudi Arabia, and many, many more governments who use the same book and have different interpretations of it, have more conservative
But they have their interpretations, not just with the book. The interpretation is because they wish to put a group of people down within their countries, not just women. So they've been doing it, and actually, it goes beyond Islam. Women have been put down, oppressed, denied rights in many different contexts, and men will use whatever comes to hand. So the interpretation of this might be in some ways to actually put women down.
Alison, does anything trouble you about other things in the context of that time, about the way that the Prophet Muhammad led his life?
Could you repeat the question? I don't.
The way that Muhammad led his life, anything about that troubles you?
I think it's completely misogynistic that, he was, it was at the time, and at that time, there's also a verse
in
that
what way
says,
was it misogynistic?
There's a verse in the Quran that says, I can't remember the chapter and the number of the verse, but it says that it addresses Muhammad and says, this is true only for you, not other believers. So you can, if you end the war with a country, you can marry the women from that country if you like. And women from your cousins are free to you to marry, and you can marry anyone you want. And this is only true for the Prophet, not for other believers.
I'm sorry, this is completely untrue.
No,
I have the fact is, the Prophet, I'm sorry, that's completely untrue. The fact is, at the time of 1400 years ago,
how many wives did he have?
He had 9 wives, but at the time, men could have endless wives. So that was the issue. Yeah, the Prophet would be different. At the end of the day, in his case, we're not saying every man can have 9 wives. But the thing is...
Is that not a bit unfair to women?
But people now...
Can I just say, the rules of marriage in Islam is that a man marries a woman. We do have dispensation for more than 1 wife, but the Quran says, but you have to be just. And to be just, you can only have 1. So the advice is just have 1. But there's dispensation for different reasons. Now, can I just add to this? Can I just add to this?
Yes,
the
please.
fact is, religion makes its own rules. It's not for secular society to tell me what my faith's rules should be. And it's not for secular society
but
to tell me
secular
what
society says you can't be a bigamist. No.
That's fine. And then, of course, in here, you cannot be a bigamist and you cannot have more than 1 wife. So as a British citizen, the state law will go above Islamic law, and I accept that completely.
Right, great.
You accept that, but the Islamic countries are not accepting that.
But that's interpretation, isn't it?
Yeah, but here what they have is a wife and 600 mistresses on the side. Don't tell me that.
Okay, everybody, let's speak to Eunice. You're a pretty recent convert, or as Muslims refer to it, a revert, and you have 2.5 years. Why did you choose Islam? Why do you think Islam was the religion for you?
Well, the reason that I chose it was more... it was more to do just with the knowledge that I found inside the Quran. It just totally blew my mind. But going back to what we were talking about, for me, as somebody that was born in Britain, raised, basically allowed to do whatever I wanted, I was brought up as a Christian, used to go to church, to pray every day, loved it. It's quite funny because I found that I had more of a sense of womanhood and sisterhood as a Muslim, and I have like 100 times more female friends as a Muslim than I ever did as a Christian or as just in general British society.
It's a sense of belonging that you found.
Yeah, I mean, just simple situations, meeting up with like 10, 15, 20 sisters and going for a coffee just doesn't happen. I find that the culture that I grew up in Britain, women tend to like compete against each other. And this is quite interesting if we're talking about Islam as well, because
of course I'm not
if we're
saying.
talking about Islam, what I love about it, and if we're talking about womanhood and sisterhood,
Is that cultural?
I think certain things are cultural.
Because there can be other countries in the world, Christian countries, where there is a better sense of sisterhood.
Yeah,
we're quite atomised in our society.
Totally. You asked me why, what I thought about it. Also, going back to what we were talking about before, what's really interesting about Islam, we're talking about this concept of covering, and or your hijab, which is both for men and for women. What I find really interesting growing up in Britain, in British culture, is kind of like minimising as much as you can, depending on you as an individual, the kind of aesthetical focus. Taking that out actually brings women together more. Do you know what I mean? So that it's funny because there's a lot, when people think about Islam and they think about women in Islam, going back to what we said before, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his first wife Khadija was a very rich businesswoman. And I think that is really important, because what that is saying to men, which in all cultures and in all faiths, can sometimes actually be intimidated by powerful, rich women. And the fact that he chose to have that as his first wife, and also choosing Bilal.
He chose it to help spread his...
Alison, what are you saying? Well, let's hear from Alison now.
I'm sorry, Khadija, yeah, she was really rich and a rich businesswoman. But part of the marriage was that he could use her money, and she was fine with it. I'm not saying she was against it. He could use her money to spread the word. And also, I'm not saying Islam is all bad.
Choosing Bilal then to recite the prayer call and what that did for slavery? I think you're missing the point. Like, I'm not saying that, like, what you're basically saying is that he almost chose Khadija only because she had, like, you know, so he could spread faith.
That was part of the reason.
What I'm trying to say that is, in our culture, there can be this kind of like thing where if you're a woman and you're really strong and you've got this major job, maybe you're prime minister, points that we made earlier in the conversation, certain people, certain men might not like their wife to be in that situation. And what I'm saying about Islam is the fact that he's done that, you know, it does
send a very powerful message.
To women.
Are you genuinely suggesting, Eunice, that men from Islamic men and men from Islamic countries are more tolerant of women in high-powered jobs? Because I think if you look around the world,
I didn't say
the difference between Saudi Arabia and Sweden, that the exact opposite is 100% true.
Can I just
Please, everyone. In order to just change gear, we're going to go to the audience. What would you like to say? Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm fine, thank you. I just wanted to say that before you were saying that a man might get intimidated by a powerful woman if that is the position that they're in. Surely that's the man's problem, and he needs to get over that
100%.
intimidation.
And the lady over here, if we can... There it comes, Laura's getting the microphone over. Morning.
I think people find it a lot easier to put the blame on men and say that men use the scripture or use religion to control women, and fail to realise that in a lot of cases women are reluctant to review scripture and review the situation for themselves and bring up the debates that need to be taken up so that people can actually look at what the true religion says and where culture has affected religion in a negative way.
Yeah. Very good point. Very quickly, if you could, because I want to
speak to Barty. A lot of comments from the different faiths. There's a thread and a theme that underlines this, and that when faiths have to be observed through religious institutions by and large, and those are by and large run by men, and with this control and power. I'm coming to a word called patriarchy, which I hear in most of the comments have been said. It's putting the interests of men over the interests of women. And a lot of the things we're talking about, it does affect men, but it also affects women.
We're going to come to that. And the reason we're going to come to it in just a minute, because I want to address the fascinating issue of Hinduism. Barty, hi. And of course, you had thousands of years ago, not just gods, and God is very much and very often and very frequently portrayed, whether it be in people's minds or whether it be generally as a man. You had goddesses.
Yes.
You have goddesses.
Yes.
Is that because it predates a kind of the nomadic desert, necessarily, arguably patriarchal society, the patriarchy? Is that because it was a different sort of society in which it flourished, in which it blossomed?
Yeah, well, the Vedic traditions originate in India, and Hinduism in particular sees God as female. So there are traditions which have God as male, and then there are traditions that have God as female. So I've been listening to this Abrahamic debate and wondering, when do the Vedic traditions come in?
Yeah.
Because for us, it's a different perspective. It's not a male God and edicts and the church. It's a female God. And rishis and sages who write in the scriptures. So we are following scriptures which were also written by female. And one of the things
Why is that? It must have grown up in a different type of society from the desert societies that gave rise to the Bible and the Quran.
Yes, it's a Vedic tradition, and it was born within India itself.
The Abrahamic traditions, though, just as a little footnote, I mean, did have goddesses as well before they were.
But we still worship God as female.
Yeah.
And it is a living tradition currently. One of the things that I would point out is sometimes what happens in faith is different from what happens in culture.
Indeed
so even within Hinduism, we have women who have to fight to become priests. Interestingly, there are more women priests in India and being ordained in India than in Britain, where a lady has been waiting for 2.5 years even to get a hearing to join the Hindu Priests Association.
Yeah.
So I think we need to also put that in context, and it doesn't surprise me at all the statement the Dalai Lama made, because he is also part of the Vedic traditions, and women are more accepted. Women have that opportunity. I myself work at national and international levels in fields where traditionally perhaps only men would sit. So I sit on the European Council of Religious Leaders.
Seen as more equal, not just seen as a sort of a vessel to have children, as a creature of creation.
As equal.
Or am I winding you up, Sarah?
Just a bit, but I'm sure you'll let me speak after this lovely lady.
Have you finished?
It's
She wants to say something.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Barty.
We're consistently transplanting a lot of secular constructs onto faith. I can just say from a Jewish point of view, God is neither male nor female. In fact, the whole debate, is he male or female, is to lower the whole understanding of what God is.
No, I'm saying about
as a spiritual being.
You said he. Is he male or female?
This is you have to get beyond.
But in answer to your point, yes, you're absolutely right.
Get beyond the language.
But there's a mindset which gives you the language as well.
And for those who can't, one feels sorry because they're not opening themselves up to the actual message.
Okay, Cole, sorry, you said Rabbi.
With all the respect I can manage, we are not in a religious debating programme. We're in a programme that's debating about the way we live in this country at the moment and the way we should be. Okay, and an interesting thing, coming up on what we were talking about Hinduism, one of the really fascinating things that's happening in Britain at the moment, as the institutional influence of Christianity has faded, is that neo-paganism and neo-paganist ideas are informing more and more of the mainstream. And one of the reasons, you go to people and ask, why are you interested in this, on whatever level, they always consistently say, because this is a kind of understanding of spirituality that has a goddess and a male and female spirit, and it deals with God in the way that Hinduism does.
I'm really intrigued for that, and Sarah, I will come to you, but I'm really intrigued because Francesca just said as a footnote when I was speaking to you, Barty, I could hear her behind, I think the camera picked you up, saying, in the Abrahamic tradition, there used to be goddesses, but they've been kind of airbrushed out. We're back to the cut, paste, delete. Has that happened?
Essentially, yes. I mean, the ancient Israelite society from which the biblical traditions of the Old Testament Hebrew Bible, Tanakh, have emerged, and then from, again, which New Testament traditions have emerged, and then some Quran traditions, it was a polytheistic society. So in other words, it wasn't just one God that was worshipped, it was many gods. It just so happens that the God of the Bible, who had a consort, the goddess Ashra. We've got inscriptions attesting to this, we've got figurines attesting to this, various neighbouring cultures have similar sorts of texts and traditions about this goddess. She, as monotheism becomes preferable to certain biblical writers over and against polytheism, so she's basically divorced and hidden
But
away.
against that, there's a strong tradition in practice of Christianity, as you know, there's a strong tradition of women celebrating their relationship with God and celebrating the female side of God as well.
Yes.
Now, let's not pretend that that doesn't exist in Christianity. It's a very powerful part.
But also,
But what about the
support the idea of
institutions?
unity?
We must, in the last few minutes available to us, get onto the institutions. And Sarah,
Yes.
I'll allow you to kick off this because I did promise to come to you a couple of moments ago. Look at the papal
Thank you.
conclave, you know,
Yes.
all those old men.
All those wonderful old men, yeah. And they were very inspiring, I thought. I do think there's something that has to be said.
Were they inspiring? Why were they inspiring? Wouldn't it have been great to
about-
have a few women in there? as well?
Well, we do need to think about two things here. What is priesthood, and what is the role of men and women working together? And we often conflate priesthood with leadership, and it's not necessarily
Then
the
why are the
same
bishops
thing.
sat in the House of Lords making decisions about what happens to my life? If we're not going to have these priests being given positions of authority, great. If these priests are just running their little church, I'm
Well,
not
but
going to
they're not
argue with
Catholic,
it. The
are they?
reality
So-
is it's not that
but
way.
can we just
There's a
say
lady here who's
decisions
so
about
desperate to
my
come in.
life.
Unless I bring her in, I fear something dreadful is going to happen.
I've come to hear from the Catholic Church, and I spoke to my priest before coming here, and I said to him, "This is the debate, and the issue is, are women treated unequally in religions?" And his phrase was, "In the church, women run the church, apart from at the top." And it's women run the church apart from at the top, and it is paradoxical because institutionally, as a leadership consultant, I know that institutionally, in terms of leadership, we will never have a pope as a leader or a priest as a woman.
We will one day.
However, but I
not
do know if you look
straight
at.
away.
Think about Mother Teresa and the kind of influence that Mother Teresa has had over the world globally. So it is paradoxical.
It is paradoxical.
That's what I'm saying.
You said
That's
Mother
my point.
Teresa, and then you said incredibly damaging.
Well, you said the
It's not
influence Mother
paradoxical,
Teresa has
it's
had in
in
the
the
world, but
plan.
Mother Teresa, if you've read any
No,
of the
I'm
books
saying-
about
no,
her,
I'm still saying she's had global influence.
poverty,
Kate
refused
Smith, wait.
treatment to people who needed medical treatment, and went out of her way to make people's lives worse because she thought that suffering brought people closer to God. She was a terrible woman, and the Catholic Church should be absolutely ashamed of her legacy.
Yeah. Hello.
Just something that Bharti was saying about how women are struggling, for example. I'm a Sikh, and as far as I know, from what I know, scripturally or whatever, women have always been encouraged to join in. Never any impediment that women can't be in positions. But then again, if you go into temples, you'll find that no women are in top positions. And why is that? Because they're bringing too many, not right at the top. I don't see many, I see mainly men monopolising, because I think men monopolising society, and that's creeping into temples, and we need to separate the two. Women are allowed to do whatever they want in temples. They can join in, sing hymns, but in the committees and the top jobs who make all decisions, women aren't there.
Why can't they, Eunice, I'll bring you in on this point. I know you want to speak. Why can't we have in mosques mixed prayers and women leading mixed
We
prayers?
have mixed prayers.
Yeah?
We do have mixed prayers in mosques.
Can women lead them?
The reason why women do not lead prayers is because our prayer as a Muslim prayer is very physical. And if you ever watch a Muslim prayer, we have to prostrate.
Down.
Yeah, put your bum up in the air. So I think the idea, but the thing is, if you take apart the role of a religious leader and put prayer aside,
So, hang on.
women in Islam can be and are religious leaders. They can
Are women
teach
allowed to
about the
watch
faith.
men praying?
Well, preferably, well, they can if they want, but they preferably not, because it's
physical.
idea is you avert your eyes when something quite physical is there. But when you come to religious leadership, there is no impediment in Islam for women to be religious leaders. And the Prophet said, take 2/3 of your faith from Aisha, who was 18 at the time. And women can be religious leaders and are religious. Well, if they're not religious leaders, because men, maybe because
I promise to come back to Eunice. Eunice, wait, Eunice. I promise to come back.
Because, you know,
it's getting quite lively,
I'd
isn't
just
it?
like to say, personally, my experience of Islam is completely, I don't know, I think there's a couple of different things going on here, and I think it's really important to differentiate between the different religions and to understand what different religions think and how they treat people. In my experience of Islam, nearly all the people I come into contact with, all the people that have taught me anything are female. Most of the events I go, 99.9% of the events and things that I attend are mixed. They're never like just women or just men.
You're in a very, very privileged position.
Yes,
I don't think in the
so.
West.
I do
You're living in Great Britain.
Listen,
please visit
listen to me.
Very quickly, I need to finish.
There's a difference between culture.
Kate, be quiet. One at a time, children.
There's a difference between culture, right, and what is written in the Quran. Now, if you see a certain practice, for example, people, maybe Muslim people or whatever, is they don't want women to lead, that's fine. That's them. That's not the faith. Do you see what I'm saying? And that point was made earlier, and this is what I'm saying to you. You need to understand the faith and study the different
because we see Islam run in a very different way in theocracies from here, and many people tell me this is a very good place to be a Muslim for lots of different reasons. Maybe the law needs to step in, and maybe the law needs to be exercised. Do you think the law needs to push? I need to move it on with this point
because. Can I just say one more thing? Even in Africa, for example, where I come from, Nigeria, it's completely normal to have like a church there and a mosque there, and it's completely normal to have both marrying each other. Whereas in Britain, that's not the case. So what you tend to find is the culture of the country that you're in will impact.
There's plenty of cross-cultural marriages here. But listen, Cole Morton, does the law need to nudge religions towards positions of equality?
The law was defined for a very long time in this country by Christianity, church, crown and state working together. That nexus is fading, is dismantling, and what the law and the state needs to do is work out a way of mediating between the many different faiths and belief systems that we now have in this country. And so the law and the state need to find a way to make it possible for us all to live respectfully in a land in which the rabbi will not shake the hand of a woman. Because actually the majority of people in society will be appalled by that, but we'd also be appalled by an attack on the rabbi's faith. So how do we mediate that?
And one of the things that the rabbi's faith in us does protect us from, because when you read secular feminist books, what's so interesting about what they're crying out for is respect. And I think that we're asking, where is women's spirituality and femininity most going to flourish? Is it in the new brutalism of the new secularism? I agree with Cole that we need to find an environment in which things are being respected. I think women are feeling their transcendence and their dignity.
Francesca, the new brutalism of the new secularism.
I have no idea what's brutal about secularism. Can you explain?
If you read Natasha Walter's rather interesting book called Living Dolls, she cites some fantastic evidence about how young women today are feeling more objectified, more demanded to have sex.
So
a few years ago. That is not patriarchy.
Christina Rees.
This is the point. That is the over-sexualization of children and of women as objects.
Christina Rees.
That is taking part in a culture and society that privileges the man over the woman, so that women are still sex objects and girls.
But women are but also women are being told to rejoice in hardcore pornography.
Sarah, no, we didn't hear a word of that, because now we can.
I do apologise.
Now we can.
I think that women are even being misled into celebrating themselves as, say, the protagonists of hardcore pornography, and they're finding themselves disillusioned with that because it's not bringing them the depth and the freedom and the spirituality they want.
So true respect is within the church.
Not just within the church, within the wisdom that spirituality, when it's really allowed to flourish, with and in dialogue with non-religious
Cole Morton.
Respectful dialogue.
Very simple point. I've been writing a lot about sexualisation of children lately, something that deeply concerns me as a father, among other things. And what I see when I read the research about the sexualisation of children is that this is happening in every kind of home. Okay, it's happening in Muslim homes, in Hindu homes, Sikh homes, Christian homes, and in homes where people are not quite sure what they believe. It's a problem about our society and about our culture, and religion is failing to say anything about it whatsoever.
It's colluding and condoning a view of women as primarily having value through our bodies, our sexuality, our availability to men, and instead of standing
That's what contraception does to women, not religion. Contraception makes women available to men all the time. That's what makes women objects.
From Christianity and Sikhism and other things that teach equality, then it fails.
Thank you all very much indeed. The debate will continue, I know it will, on Twitter and online and here next week. We're not on because it's Pentecost. We'll be back from Edinburgh on May the 12th. From now, thank you for watching. Goodbye from everyone in Birmingham.